Professor Vedpi Nanda, Padma Bhushan awardee. And good evening, friends in India. We are privileged to have Professor Vedpi Nanda with us. And as you know that we have a lecture series called as Vyakhyan. So this is 2021 version. Today, Sir is going to enlighten us on gender equality and empowerment of women. Present progress 25 years after Beijing. Before Sir starts, I'll request Dr. Subhash Pandey to give a welcome address. Over to you, Dr. Pandey.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ahuja. It's a privilege to welcome Professor Nanda here on a topic of great importance, gender equality. Dear friends, as you may be aware, Padma Bhushan Professor Ved Nanda is a distinguished professor of University of Denver since 1965. Professor Nanda is a John Evans Distinguished University Professor and Thompson G. Marsh Professor of Law at the University of Denver Strum College of Law. He is also the founding director of the International Legal Studies Program and director of the Ved Nanda Center for International and Comparative Law. He is indeed a true leader in the field of international law and policy, and his work on international peace and universal human rights has been vital to the progress of humanity. He has drafted numerous international human rights documents, advised world leaders, and led countless institutions and associations in his long and distinguished career. Professor Nanda sir has been honored with numerous international and national awards, including Padma Bhushan Award on 20th March 2018 in the field of literature and education, Louis Vuitton Award for Public International Law from the ABA section of International Law, the World Jurist Association, World Legal Scholar Award, United Nations Association Human Rights Award, and the Hiroshima Peace Award. Professor Nanda was honored in 2017 in the US House of Representatives. So Professor Nanda sir has authored and co-authored more than 25 books in various fields of international law and contributed over 25 chapters and major law review articles in a regular columnist for Denver Post. He's a frequent contributor in print and electronic media internationally. So, sir, it is with great privilege and pleasure we welcome you, sir, and we are eager to hear what you are going to say, tell us on this important topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey. I'm delighted, privileged, and honored to be with you. And Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance, its institution of eminence, for your very kind invitation. And before I begin, I do want to say my warmest regards and warmest wishes to Dr. Subhash Pandey, Dr. Virender Ahuja, Dr. Ashutosh Mishra, and all the respected participants today. This is, as Dr. Pandey said, a very, very important topical issue. And 25 years have passed. This is the 26th year. And in Beijing, at that time, one of the biggest ever international conferences, and people from all over the world. And there they took a pledge, and world leaders very, very vigorously pleaded to the entire international community that we need to have gender equality, empowerment of women in the days to come. Years have passed, and now that we are looking at 2030, and the United Nations has begun the process in 2015, a 15 years effort in order to have sustainable development goals. And one of those goals is women's empowerment. It is to achieve gender equality by 2030. So today I'm honored to address that topic. As mentioned, it's a fragile, very fragile progress. It's a very modest progress. The effort was that nobody should be left behind, and we are nowhere there. So again, my deep regards and thanks to the Delhi, this your prestigious institution, the Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance, and the Vedanta Center for International Law, Comparative Law, is very pleased to collaborate with you. And I hope that in the future also we can participate in collaboration with each other. Wish I could say to you today that huge progress has been made. But as I mentioned, the progress is modest. And let me begin. It was 3 days ago that Human Rights Watch, it called upon the country of Qatar to eliminate its discriminatory male guardianship rules. As you probably know, that women there are largely denied the right to take decisions even on travel, on reproductive health care. They need to obtain permission from male guardians prior to engaging in any such activities. A married woman is considered disobedient if she acts without her husband's permission. A woman is not even allowed to act as her children's primary guardian, even if she is divorced. Thus, women are left vulnerable, they are trapped in abusive relationships. And Qatar is not alone. Within the last 2 weeks, Turkey pulled out of the Council of Europe treaty. That treaty is the Istanbul Accord. And what it did say simply said that although Turkey had signed in 2011, and the treaty is designed to protect women, to prevent, to prosecute, and eliminate domestic violence. Because as you know, domestic violence, again, is a big menace that women face all over the world. And it also seeks and to promote equality among genders. In Turkey, femicide has emerged and it has been going on in the country, especially in recent years. Many other European countries are also threatening to quit that treaty, and some are not ratifying it. You probably have seen, many of you, students, faculty members, even people in community, that you have got friends from countries where at the present time, women are not given not only equal status, but they are not provided even the basic rights that every human being ought to have just because we are all human beings. I have students in my class from so many countries, from the Middle East, from Europe, from Latin America, and I permit from the Graduate School of International Studies, MA and PhD students, along with my own law students, both doing the basic JD degree and the graduate programs. And I find day after day those students who in the class, because they've got many other students from the same country, may not say anything. But as I teach human rights on one, they come and tell me about the humiliation, about embarrassment, about difficulties that they have in their own country. In many places, even today, without a male guardian, they can't go shopping. They can't go anywhere. And that is the situation in many countries at the present time. UN Secretary General the other day said, and I want to mention that recently he said that in the last few years, there has been even a pushback against these goals again, gender equality, women's rights. And the sad part is that some progress that had been made because of this COVID-19, there has been even regression on it. Speaking of violence against women, the World Health Organization had recently submitted a report, and it was just about 3 weeks ago. And it points a pretty grim picture at the present time. And I'll talk more about it. But the fact is that you have today a pretty sad setting in the international arena. Very briefly, what was that report from the World Health Organization? It said that violence against women remains devastatingly pervasive. It starts alarmingly young because the data that they have now acquired also from their own partners, and they say across their lifetime, 1 in 3 women, just think about it, 1 in 3 women, and that means around 736 million women are subjected to physical or sexual violence. And it could be by an intimate partner or from a non partner. And a number that has remained largely unchanged over the past decade. And it gives all kind of numbers. I'm not going to go into them, but I want to say just a couple sentences from the WHO Director General who said, violence against women is endemic in every country, in every culture, causing harm to women and millions of women, not only they, but their families. And it has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But unlike COVID-19, and he's absolutely right, violence against women cannot be stopped with a vaccine. We can change harmful attitudes, improve access to opportunities and services for both women and girls. How should we do that? We should take action. We should foster healthy and mutually respectful relationships. Violence against women, as we think about it, is really one of those tragedies that, despite all the efforts, continues. Intimate partner violence is by far the most prevalent form of violence against women. And it's happened globally. And it affects around, the number obviously is really amazing, 641 million women. And then more than 1 million, they are sexually assaulted by someone other than their husband or partner. But what can and what should be done, especially about this sexual violence against women? And here, what they have done is they have looked at many efforts made by countries, by women's organizations, and those that have at the present time challenged inequitable social norms, who have asked for reforming of discriminatory laws, who have asked for strengthening legal responses. And what the report says, and I want to quote that, to address violence against women, there is an urgent need to reduce stigma around this issue, to train health professionals to interview survivors with compassion, dismantle the foundations of gender inequality. And then there are some specific actions, and I might mention just a few. Sound gender transformative policies, from policies around childcare, policies on equal pay, and policies in order to have legislation, to have laws. What do those laws do? That support gender equality. Health system becomes a very, very important issue, as all of you know. A strengthened health system response that ensures access to survival centered care and referral to other services as needed. Interventions in schools, educational institutions, and what kind of interventions? To challenge discriminatory attitudes and beliefs, including comprehensive sexuality education, targeted investment in sustainable and effective evidence-based prevention and prevention strategies. They can't be taken only in one place. They have to be at local, at national, at regional, at global levels. And one thing that is missing in many places is that we don't have really high quality data. We need to strengthen that kind of data collection, and that again, it might be useful to improve measurement of the different forms of violence experienced by women, including those who are most marginalized. As you know, what happened in Beijing was really absolutely amazing. There was a loud and clear call to the whole world to say that women's rights are human rights. Last Friday, the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and it has been working very, very hard, a UN body, it concluded its 65th session. And that session that went on for 2 weeks, and it meets every year, it ended on a very somber note because, as the Under Secretary General of the UN and the Women's Executive Director, UN Women's Executive Director, she noted the challenges women and women human rights defenders face in so many countries. She said the COVID-19 pandemic is indeed deepening pre-existing inequalities, inequalities that perpetuate discrimination as well as racism, stigmatization, and xenophobia. Women have been mostly absent from COVID-19 government task forces. And that is really amazing because they have had very little role to play in decision making as to what actions governments might take in order to combat this menace. Because they make up only 25% of the 225 task force members across 137 countries. That is what the UN Commission had gathered from countries. And just this February, the European Parliament noted with concern they had done the 2020 review of the Beijing Declaration, Beijing Platform for Action. And what they found is that no European member state, not even one, and let me repeat, no European member state completed the targets that were set at the Beijing Convention in 1995. And I should add here, it's not simply Europe. Europe, I especially meant to say because it talks about being exemplary in taking action to ensure that there is gender equality. And that Parliament said, now that the social and economic impacts of COVID-19 are adversely affecting women and girls, disproportionately affecting them as pre-existing gender inequalities are exacerbated. There is a real threat to reverse the progress made in the last 25 years. And that will be just an exceptionally sad setting that instead of making progress, we are moving back. The estimates are that the pandemic will push, and kindly see that what it's going to mean, 47 million more women and girls below the poverty line globally. And you'll be probably as horrified as I am that the total number at the present time is almost 450 million women in that category. So when last October, the United Nations wanted to look at the review of 25 years and what the United Nations actions have been, what the actions of the countries are. And at that time, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he addressing the opening session of that meeting said, pointing to the frequent exclusion of women, and kindly keep in mind, this is one of the most important areas: peace negotiations, climate talks, decision-making roles of all kinds, and frequent exclusion of women from them. 1 in 3 women experience some form of violence in our lifetime. This is a pretty sorry figure, because the World Bank estimates it could take 150 years to achieve gender equality in lifetime earned income. 150 years to have a day come when income equality takes place. The executive director of the UN Women said, there has been significant pushback on reproductive rights. She explained that groups once in the fringes are now in the mainstream. And developed countries from the global earth are also being part of pushback. And called for pushback to that pushback. And, talking about UN, and they're talking about this review marking that 50 years since Beijing Declaration. I think women's rights are under attack, because not a single country, as I mentioned to you, has reached the goals and aspirations that the Beijing conference had put together. UN Secretary General again at that point said, centuries of discrimination, deep-rooted patriarchy and misogyny that they have attributed to gender inequality all these years. Let me give you some numbers. And I think listening to those numbers and looking at those numbers, kind of eyes glaze over. But I won't give you too many numbers, but I do want to give you numbers. And that numbers indicate that although some progress has been made, because many countries have legal regulatory reforms made, more girls have been in school, maternal mortality has decreased somewhat. But how much work has to be done? Numbers are 1 in 4 seats are held by women in national parliaments. 1 in 4, 25%. Poverty, when you think about it, 25%. Globally, women aged 25 to 34 are going to be more likely than men to live in extreme poverty. 25% more. On unpaid care, domestic work, women do 4.1 hours per day, and men do just about 1.5 hours per day. On labor force participation, gender parity in the workplace is obviously not there. They are paid at least 16% less than men. And 1 in 4 managers will be a woman. They don't have access to finance. On violence against women, I already mentioned. On a climate justice issue, climate emergency will most affect those with limited access to land, resources, or the means to support themselves. And here, 39% of employed women are working in agriculture, forestry, fisheries, but only 14% of agricultural landholders are women. So 40% working in it, only 14% having a place of eminence in that. Similarly, access to justice is not there. In health, 190 million women of reproductive age 15 to 49 worldwide who wanted to avoid pregnancy did not use any contraceptive method. And they wanted to do that because they have too many children. They don't want to add any more. I have here a whole lot of numbers on women's economic independence that is not there and which is crucial. And they are economically dependent. On extreme poverty, there are these figures that are really mind-boggling. And I could go on and on for each country. I wouldn't do that. But on freedom from violence, and these millions who are suffering from violence, that I think demands action. Their representation in political life, their demanding equal power and not being able to get it. What really is most important is that building peaceful, inclusive societies in which they should have a role, they are often excluded from peace processes. I work on war and peace issues. Many of you do. And those of you who do work in that process, you have probably seen that at the present time, as you look on all kind of peace processes, the numbers are staggering because between 1992 and 2018, only 13% of negotiators, only 4% of signatories, and only 3% of mediators in major peace processes were women. And women who are peaceful, women who can play an important role in that setting, they are practically excluded from all that. So I think I won't give you any more numbers, but the point simply I want to mention to you is that vision that Beijing had brought to our attention, we are nowhere close to realizing that vision. And now that we have 2030 as the goal of sustainable development, and that goal, I think by 2030, a girl who's 15, 16 years now, she'll be a woman of 25. And can she enjoy equal rights within marriage? Can she not be burdened by caring and domestic responsibilities to the extent that she can't do anything else? And that really is the issue that we need to address. I think I should probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes conclude it. So let me leave a few things out that I want to say and need to say, but I think I can probably mention a couple of things. I suggested to you, mentioned to you that just this last week, on the 26th of March, the UN Commission on the Status of Women concluded its last session. And in that session, they had some conclusions. It was obviously a session that was not really in person, but 25,000 women from 180, 190 countries participated in it. And they did a whole lot of data collection. And then they made some conclusions and had some recommendations. And those recommendations I want briefly to mention to you. They asked that women's role should be in decision-making processes. And how should that happen? Countries should change laws and policies that discriminate against women and hinder their equal participation in public life. They must take innovative measures to promote women as leaders, executives, managers in all areas. That they must set targets, they must set timelines to achieve gender balance in all government branches through relevant measures such as quotas, appointments, training programs. Normally, you don't want quotas, but in this case, you'll have to do that in order to make sure that at least some progress continues to be made. Political parties need to be encouraged to nominate as many women as men candidates and promote their equal leadership in their structures. And there are plenty more recommendations, but these are among some that I wanted to mention to you. Those of you who are interested in seeing what's going on, I would very much like for you to know that Commission on the Status of Women meets every year. And the Secretary General of the United Nations had given last Commission's report, which is a pretty eye-opener. And I would suggest to you that those who are interested, kindly go to the UN documents. And this document is on Economic and Social Council, and it's 21st December 2020. And the title is Women's Full and Effective Participation and Decision-Making in Public Life, as well as the Elimination of Violence for Achieving Gender Equality and the Empowerment of All Women and Girls. And that is the Secretary General's report. Another report, also in December 2020, is from the Commission on the Status of Women. I'll probably leave that aside. And right now, I would mention to you some of the recommendations that the European Parliament made, because they also found, as I mentioned, not a single country in Europe had reached the targets or come even close to reaching the targets of Beijing's conference's targets. So just like the Commission recommendations, the European Union is called upon to establish targets, action plans, timelines, and temporary special measures to achieve those goals. Action by executive, by legislative, by administrative bodies. Strengthen efforts to close the gender pay gap. In my own universities and in my own law school, women had again raised a very strong voice. I have been vice provost, vice chancellor, administrative work in my university, and now I'm back on the faculty after 14, 15 years in the administration. And I feel very strongly the same way as women on my faculty feel that they ought to be paid equally. So to close the gender pay gap, enforce the equal pay principle. How should you do that? You must adopt legislation to increase pay transparency. There should be mandatory measures for all comparisons and by all companies. Parliament regretted that the Commission had not undertaken that action so far. Commission is also asked the European Commission to examine women's participation in the labor market. They are to have meaningful participation in key decision-making bodies, in the design of gender-sensitive recently, their recovery, their economic stimulus packages, and women's employment gap ought to be taken care of. Greater participation of women in STEM careers and studies, and many other, but especially on gender-based violence, how to eradicate that. The fear is that without firm action now, COVID-19 could wipe out a generation of even fragile progress made towards gender equality. Let me conclude by saying that last year, along with two of my students, we did a pretty extensive study. The study was in order to see how the Sustainable Development Goal 5 that I mentioned to you, and that goal is that gender equality, women's empowerment must be achieved for all by 2030. And we wanted to check out what had happened in the last 25 years. It was an extensive study, but obviously not an exhaustive study. And then we had some statisticians who could correlate what countries had done and what the CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination of All Kinds Against Women, that CEDAW Convention, what it had asked countries to do. And we wanted to correlate countries' actions with CEDAW and how far they had gone to achieve the goals of Beijing. And the conclusion that we came up was that those countries that had aligned their legislative action, their executive action, their judicial action with CEDAW's goals,
Someone's all mute.
those countries had been able to achieve greater progress. I think we came to a conclusion that that is what needed to be done. That in order to achieve that gender equality, nations might look at CEDAW, might look at CEDAW's goals, might look at their own legislation, and they ought to see if that legislation comes closer to what CEDAW expected, what CEDAW wanted them to do. And our conclusion was that those countries that have done some work in that regard to relate to SIDA have succeeded. I'm going to send this a copy. It's not a huge, but about 60 pages in print, and it's a global efforts to realize the essential but elusive goal of gender equality and women's empowerment as in Sustainable Development Goal 5. I'm going to send that study to Dr. Ahuja, and those of you who might want to look at that study, please do so. So let me again conclude by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. And I wish that I could give you a very bright picture. Unfortunately, I can't. But at the same time, I think the message all around is clear that women that are there 50% today in the world, women who are the ones responsible for keeping families intact, women who usually and always give a message of peace, that they ought to be given the opportunity to play a much more important role in a country's life, in the global life, and especially when we are talking about peace and peace negotiations, why shouldn't they be part of it? And also at the present time, as they suffer from violence, and especially from violence at home, at home, that ought to be stopped. I know India's traditions, and I know that even in ancient India, you had a tradition of having a woman play a more important role than anybody else, equal to man. That among deities, um, women and their role is considered to be as important as of men, and a man is considered to be not complete unless there is a woman with him, and they play an equal part. So I think the time has come that in every country, people think about the role of women, give them a prominent role, and then if we need to talk about harmony and peace and equality, there is absolutely no choice. So with my, again, thanks to you for permitting me to share my thoughts. I'm happy to have any comments or questions. Dr. Huja, is that all right?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for enlightening us on the women empowerment. And of course, we really wanted to know a good picture, actually, see a good picture of.
Sir,
Can you please mute yourself? Dr. Ajay, kindly see that all are muted.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, we really wanted to see a very good picture, 20 years after the Beijing Declaration. But unfortunately, as you have rightly pointed out, the things are not like as, we wish them to happen. But then, sir, again, don't you think that this is a chain reaction where, you talk about sustainable goal number 5, and then if we are not in a position to empower women, if we are not in a position to achieve the targets which have been laid down by the declaration and the developments thereafter, then it will become difficult for us to attain the sustainable goal also.
Absolutely. And that really, I just looked yesterday at the progress made toward Goal 5 and the Secretary General's report, the report of the high level group. And they are finding that unfortunately COVID-19 and the challenges that COVID-19 presented, that because of that, unfortunately, today we really haven't made any progress. And whatever progress had been made, some of that has been at the present time being wiped out. So you're absolutely right. The goal cannot be achieved without that.
Thank you. Now, I'll request all the participants to send their questions in the chat box, and sir will be taking up a few questions. Sir, I'm delighted to share with you that certain senior professors, Professor R.N. Sharma who's Dean of the IMS University, Dehradun, Professor Nujat Hassan from Dean Bennett University, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, and there are many others like Dr. J. Umar Rao from Geetam University. These senior professors are also there, so I'll request all of them to kindly share their view if they want, and they can send their questions in the chat box.
Well, thank you very much. I'm deeply honored that they are there, and I'm here to learn from them and to be educated. So kindly, not simply questions. Questions are going to be to me, but I would like for you to have comments, and those comments would be helpful to me.
Dr. Ajay, can you take up the questions if there are any in the chat box?
Yes, sir. There's the one question that to what extent might the social norms follow political powers, and is there any way to cultivate the norm of equal power in National Congress? So, could a solution be a global election fund for women running in the local election, run a female, transgender, or non-binary candidates? So, if question is there, the chat box has been sent. So,
I
it is
think
related with
two
political
things.
representation. Yes, sir.
Two things about it. One is that political parties, they need to be aware of the need in order to nominate women to run for offices. And I think if the political parties take that action, that is helpful. In the United States, I don't know, unfortunately, about India. I'm sure that they are doing it, and I don't need to mention anything about that because you are the ones who take care of it. But here in this country, both the Republican and the Democratic parties in the last few years have made a special effort to find qualified, to find appropriate women to take action, to run for the parliament. Uh, Here, the parliament, as you know, we've got two possibilities, the House of Representative or Senate. And I'm very, very pleased to tell you that both parties have succeeded in sending more women to both the House and the Senate. And the second thing would be that not only that, but people who are in power in my country here at the present time, obviously the president is the one who is going to nominate the Supreme Court judges, nominate again own cabinet members, and to positions of power. And here I'm very pleased to tell you that after this election, um, President Biden has taken a great deal of pains in order to see the very best women are being put forward in order to be on the Supreme Court, on again cabinet positions, and again positions of power in the political arena. Yesterday, the president um, indicated names of women that he is going to appoint to courts of appeal, and they are the ones who are likely to get to the Supreme Court. And among his nominees, there were 70% women, and out of those, almost 50, 60% women of color. And so we are likely to have a woman, another woman on the Supreme Court who is not a white woman, but a woman of color. So I think both the political parties and people in power, and also the legislative means taken by some countries that they must have representation at least this much percentage, if not totally 50%, women in their own parliament in decision-making processes. So it's a long answer, but political parties and people in power and legislation efforts. All of them need to go simultaneously in order to make that happen.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one question from Professor Sharma, sir. Sir is asking the correlation with respect to how the SDG goal will help in empowerment in general sense.
I'm sorry, it didn't come across again. Please say it again.
Yes, sir. Question is that as we have discussed the SDG goal with respect to our theme of the today's program, but the Professor Sharma is asking with the empowerment of women in general sense, in general category, apart from today's theme of the program.
I think if I hear the question right.
Hello, turn. Mute yourself. May I request everybody to please mute yourself?
I'm glad to hear all that, but that doesn't permit me to understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think the SDG 5, I think besides all that, I think I don't know what other actions can be taken, but I think from the universities to temples and all these civil society groups, all of them need to make effort in order to make it happen. But Dr. Ahuja, if my colleagues who are on this call and in this session, if there are any suggestions, as I mentioned about the paper that we did, but also all that is happening around the world, if there are any suggestions, kindly ask them. I'll be delighted if they could give me some advice and counsel, because I'm going to keep doing a little bit more work on it as to how the universities and scholars can make their contribution towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5.
Professor Sharma and Professor Nujat Khan, if you can just hear me, would you like to express your opinion within 2 minutes or so? Dr. Ajay, I think you have muted everyone.
Yes. So
As-
my concern
Professor Sharma, please introduce yourself to sir.
myself, Professor R.N. Sharma, Dean, School of Law, IMS Unison University, Dehradun. My concern regarding correlating SDG goals with the empowerment of women and gender equality, particularly in Indian conditions, I think that will not be a sustainable system. Because achieving SDG goals is altogether different. That may be possible in developed countries, but in India, where the most of the women are living in rural areas and 60% of the women are agriculture based and work in the home only. So for them, this theory may not be useful as has been propounded by Professor. That is my observation.
Sharmaji, that's very good. Thank you very much. What's going to happen in India? You are the ones who are responsible for that. But you know, equality doesn't necessarily mean that equality has to be in the labor market, or equality has to be in terms of their education. But equality at the present time does mean that there should be no domestic violence against them. And equality does mean that at least at home, even if in rural areas, not only in India, but anywhere in the world, that a woman is given respect, that a woman is treated equally, and then that equality is all that is sought. No violence against them, even at home when the decisions are going to be made, that she might have a say in it. In many countries where a woman cannot inherit, where a woman cannot even have on her own children the right to be having their to take care of them, but the man is the only one who is going to have inheritance rights, not even a woman. And in some countries, if a man marries a woman from another country, that woman can get the nationality of the country where the husband is. But if a woman marries a man from another country, woman in that country doesn't have a right to have her husband get the nationality. So that inequality all over. And even in India, in India, I don't have any right to say anything about it. You are the ones who have got to decide about it. But even in India, at home, in rural areas, a woman to be treated equally, that is not something to ask which cannot be done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one more question. That this question is with respect to the what role do you envision for academic institutions in restructuring of patriarchal society through medium of education?
Very good. And I think the point simply would be that in educational institutions, one thing would be that the woman is treated equally as a man. And second would be that in those educational institutions, if there are some courses and if there are some human rights course, for example, being there, and people are educated about these issues, that a woman has an important role to play, both at home, and if it is simply at home, that's fine. But if the woman is able to work, then in the workplace also, she should be respected. She should not be harassed, and she should not be have to suffer the kind of violence at home or violence from others. So I think that would probably be the things that the educational institution can do, because they can do scholarship, they can do teaching, and they can treat women who are working there equally as men. And that's not too much to ask. I think even in a country, any country, and I don't talk about India, but any country where you're thinking about uh, women and men working together or living in a place as a family, it's not too much to ask that a woman be treated properly, that a woman at least have a decision-making process at home, that she is not subjected to violence. And that is really what needs to be done. But educational institutions, both in teaching and scholarship, at least have that respect for a woman. Woman is a mother. She is the one that nurtures the family. She is the one that brings the children to manhood. Woman is the one that keeps harmony at home. So why should she not be treated appropriately and properly and equally as a man? I think for centuries, man has played a dominant role, but there is no reason. I think the point simply would be that in those homes where people have kind of that equality, understanding, appreciation of a woman as an important part of the family, as having equal rights to a man, I think even in a family, when that happens, there is harmony, there is peace, there is a nurturing of people properly, children properly. And I think that is good for the family, that's good for the community, that's good for the country, that's good for the world.
Dr. Ajay, is there any other question?
Yes. No, sir. We have already covered the next question. Answer. So,
Vrindaji,
only
it's
for now.
an hour, and
Yeah.
you might think that that's the proper time. then we might even conclude it. But before you do that, I need again to thank you. I need again to thank Suhashi, and I need to thank all the people, Ashutoshji and others who have been here, and my Sadar Namaskar and Pranam to all of you. I came from Bharat. I am an alumnus of the University of Delhi, and although I live in this country, my roots are in India. And being my roots in India, I love that country, and I have the highest regard for its own traditions, although I live in the United States.
Sir, thank you very much.
Vinodji, India is an independent country, free country. People can do what they want. So if they don't want to unmute themselves or mute themselves, it's up to them.
I'm really sorry for that, sir. And thank you very much for your excellent speech, sir. On behalf of DSPPG, it's my proud privilege to thank Professor Vedpi Nanda, Professor of University of Denver, and distinguishing professor from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Sir has been visiting India annually. I mean, he comes once in a year and he stays with us for a week. And he interacts with the students, the teachers, delivers a lot of lectures. But this time, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, he was unable to come, though we wanted him to be here physically with us. But I requested sir to be with us virtually, if not physically, and he was kind enough to accept our invitation. Sir, thank you very much for your excellent speech, and keep on guiding us, bless us, keep on accepting our invitations from time to time. And it is really good to see you and deliver lectures, at Delhi University departments.
I'm deeply honored. My pranam to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm also thankful to Dr. Subhash Pandeyji, Professor R.N. Sharma, Professor Nujat Khan, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, Rita Khannaji, the mediator, Dr. J. Umarao, Dr. Gandhi Anand, Dr. Sharda, Dr. Isha Wadhwa, Dr. Ajay Sonavane. Dr. Ajay Sonavane is the one who is like organizing the entire program. And if any complaint is there, because he could not mute the participants, that has to go to him only. So I'm going to ask him on that. I'm also thankful to Ms. Madhuri, Mr. Deepak Singh, all participants. I could see some advocates have also joined, and all students, volunteers, and everyone who was associated with this program. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you.